share the screen maybe, or you should be, or you can share?
I should be able to share. You go ahead. It's fine. I don't even know if there's anything on it.
Yeah, there is one topic. Yeah.
And I was going to add one to ask for an update from Istvan if he's got any update on the unit test failure.
Yeah.
Why is that in purple? Okay.
Yeah, we'll change the color.
I don't know if it's because there's a suggestion or if it's just it just was in purple.
Yeah, if it's purple, it doesn't show up on the outline, basically.
Yeah, hit the checkbox there. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So I think the other important thing is, I also we all have to review PR 57. I think we should try to review. I will do it right after this meeting. Try to get it in ASAP because we will be blocked otherwise. And then 56 is the next one, I think. So these are the two APIs that we need to get merged ASAP, I think.
Yeah, thanks, Wim. Yeah, we saw that in the Slack as well.
So I had one other topic, I think that's related to this Liam's topic, but I'm not sure. Around it gets back to the discussion we had yesterday around, or not yesterday, last week, around the Bootstrap controller, like similar discussions around the repository controller. So I'll just add that to the end, I guess.
Yeah.
So, all right, why don't we get started? Liam, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to. I'll be talking to Vish and offline, and also to Fikra a little bit. I've been doing a small bit of. I just rather than just looking at code, I said I'd do a bit of test coverage stuff. So I picked the repository reconciler, and I was just looking at the way that mocking is done in Go, and I was looking for a little bit of guidance around that. So I know Vish, you use mockery, and then there's also something called Go mock, isn't there? And Fikra, I think you were looking at what was, I can never remember the name of that thing. The M-test, is it? Yeah.
M-test, yeah.
Now, in the case of this reconciler, that repository reconciler, if I actually just move some of the methods back into the Git client, it turns out to be that I can actually get it's not that hard to mock that particular one, but just I'm not using any framework at all. I just I just have an implementation of that Git client interface in my mock class in my mock. In the test program, and it seems to work pretty okay. I got the coverage up to 57.9% on my local here, but I have a review up there, which maybe I can just very quickly share to show what I'm doing. And I just want to know if we're on the right track here. Really more than anything else. I just get a little bit of guidance from the more expert people just see if I can find the right thing to share here. I know that all the debates that people have about mock or not mock, and how much mocking should you do and all of that, but I guess let me just see. Let's see.
Is it okay if I can make some points? Or
yeah, please do.
Fikra was ahead of me.
I think Fikra was ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, you go ahead, Vish. Go ahead, Vish.
I just want to only share my experience that Bala and I had when we were doing the, when we worked on the OV and Kubernetes. And of course, there's not always a single solution that, that always works. There's not one thing that we always need to follow. In general, one, the basic Golang feature providing Go, for doing unit testing works for most of the cases. And second, there are certain integrations at which point of time, you don't want to be necessarily running those pieces of code. You don't want to do integration testing. You just want to make sure that your piece of code is unit tested. And that is where mocking came into picture. And back then in 2021 or 2020, when we were looking at this, there was Go mock and there is mockery. So I had done an analysis when I was looking at it. I mean, it might be outdated, but at least we were able to adopt that after looking at how the stretcher library and the mockery, we were able to generate mocks using interfaces, even of third-party libraries. So I would have them in my testing directory, and I would use that to actually do the unit tests. So things could have changed. And then there is the BDD or the Go Omega and the, what is it called, Ginkgo, which I think is still needed for behavior testing, for some things. So it is okay to have the spectrum, basically. And for part of least resistance to make progress, I mean, we don't have to always be stuck with the same thing. We can have, that is why I suggested mockery to you. We can start off with that, and we can get to that level where we are able to generate mocks from interfaces. You can see how far it takes. And I think we still probably need to use any of the BDD related stuff for other scenario testing that we might need. Or if we went, I think I also looked at GoMock and I had some comparison. Actually, I can save some of those links, but that was me getting convinced that way. But I can share the resources, that way you guys can be convinced also. So that way it is not being, imposed or thrown or anything. But the idea is to actually have some least, something that works, that the path that we can take before we make other, other decisions. That's what my motivation was for sharing that. That's it from my side.
Fikra?
Yeah. I guess this is again kind of a philosophical question about testing, but yeah, testing for some people is easy, for others it's painful. For learning a new language, I struggle. Like, I think our main difficulty is we're probably not going to achieve 100% coverage on controllers, right? Unless you actually break your back trying to test every permutation. But I think Tal raised the point around env tests, and whether that, I know that's kind of integration level, and maybe setting that up. I had a stab at it, but it looks it looks maybe more complex than it could be. Quite simple, but it looked a bit messy to me. But I guess because we're using the controller runtime client, and they themselves, like the actual project themselves, recommend not to use mocks and to use mtest. They have a fake, and I know Vim, you have a fake there as well, also that you have a kind of skeleton there for faking the client. But yeah, I guess it's a decision to be made whether we go the whole hog or kind of piecemeal. And I guess everybody going at it from different directions might get a bit messy, and that's just unit testing versus kind of higher up the test pyramid. I don't know. Yeah, it's just an observation, but I struggled kind of even have a PR up there as well, just for refactoring the Bootstrap controller, and I struggled to mock out the clients, and I borrowed or repurposed a piece from the Kept project actually, which worked. But yeah, I guess it's mocking the boundaries is where the difficulties are going to be, as usual, But that's, and what's the best? And again, for me, it's kind of what's the best approach here from the people who have been coding in Go much longer than I have. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to add to Fiakra's point, sorry to jump the queue. I can share some examples if it helps. I mean, me and Liam can actually share some examples of some, maybe in the next meeting, for what we have done, at least for people to become familiar with what we have done, if that would be helpful.
And I think actually, just to jump the queue as well myself, I think the issue about how Gitea or GitHub is structured is a different question really, and I think it's perfectly okay to have two reconcilers. It's just that it's the when the third party library you're using, like the Gitea client in this case, doesn't have an interface, it just has a struct, then it's very difficult to mock it. So what you do, then you can abstract it, so at least then that maybe everybody in Nepio then goes through the interface, which then wraps it. I know it's kind of it's a wrapping thing, but where do you draw the line? I know I see this. I haven't coded much in Go, but I've coded a huge amount of stuff in Java and C++ in the day. This is a common problem. It transcends languages.
Yeah. So I guess just to throw I don't have super strong opinions on this, and if like, I think that principally, I try to minimize the additional libraries and things that I need, because then you need to learn those frameworks. And I honestly spend so little time coding that actually having to learn a whole framework becomes a barrier. So like, you know, I tend to just stick to the very, very basics. It's the same reason I use VI. I don't use an IDE, right? I've been using it for a long time. And like, if I spent more time in that activity, I may have different opinions. So I don't want to impose, again, like I think like Vish said, I don't want to impose anything. Like, I think it's the community and the people who spend their days in that more than I do that should make those decisions. But that's for what it's worth. I try to avoid that, which means a little bit like what Liam's saying, like sometimes the code's not written well, so that there's not an interface where, and so you can't create a fake or whatever it is. And so you sometimes have to actually refactor the code to make it testable. And I think that that's okay. And I actually don't have a problem with, what you described of putting an interface there on top of a third-party Git client so that we can have a fake Git client and do unit tests. That seems reasonable. So that's, for whatever it's worth, it's not, I don't have a strong opinion. I tend to stick to, what I can eat, just to,
Yeah, I know. This debate can, the purists and the people who do this for a living, the debate about or have opinions about, you must have 70% coverage or whatever it is, but I think you should have the coverage that's appropriate for the system that you're developing. Yeah.
Cool, thanks. Based a couple of comments. One is to Fiacra, I mean, we should never try to get 100% coverage. I think after 80%, it's been proven after a certain percentage, it's kind of a diminishing return.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think somewhere around 75 to 80% is a good thing. I also want to point out, coming from a different world to Golang, if at all somebody is coming from a JVM world to Golang, they are in for a rude shock, because idiomatic Go does not prescribe anything. Like, it does not tell you that you should use interfaces. For example, if you're coming from a JVM world, whether you're using Scala or Kotlin, even in pure Java. So, and there are just the way the class it's since being is object oriented, and all the dependencies are injected. They are not created or instantiated within the code. They are all injected in any if you look at any of those languages. So since they are injected, they are very amenable for unit testing, because you can easily mock your dependencies, and they're a very robust ecosystem. Whereas in idiomatic Go, I tried to do that in my very first Go coding exercise in Red Hat. My PR was rejected outright. They said, this is not how you code in Go. I was trying to put interfaces for everything. I was trying to put, I was trying to kind of mimic the dependency injection so that I could mock them. And then they said my PR was immediately rejected. saying this is not idiomatic Go. So kind of idiomatic Go, my understanding is sometimes it makes it very difficult for us to unit test, especially when there are complex dependencies involved and they're not being injected. To that point, Fiacre also brought up this point. I think we can be flexible in terms of what frameworks that we use. For example, I personally like Ginkgo a lot because I came from Spock world. Spock is a BDD framework in the JVM. It's basically, it can use it for unit class integration testing. So it's very expressive, and it organizationally, you can very organize things in a very different way. But I personally like it, but I'm not suggesting everybody should use that. We should be flexible in that. But what we should be what we should have opinion about is some of the points that Fiacre brought out. If at all you want to mock, you are in a situation where you have to mock the controller itself. So I think on those opinions, we should be very opinionated so that our code looks uniform in terms of how it's tested. Otherwise, I use the fake controller, somebody else use their own mock. I think it's going to be, the code base is going to be messy. So those are some of the few points I wanted to talk.
So maybe I'll add Google's perspective here. So as you know, we have a downstream product, TNA, and Google's internal requirements are absolutely, a lot of testing. You'll see it. So we have the seed code from Google that I know not a lot of people looked at closely, which is the status aggregation, right? And you'll see there we do quite a bit of mocking. I'm actually not sure what survived exactly at this point, but we even have mocks for Porch, right? So for testing, for example, interfaces with Porch, we have a mock version of Porch that can return certain values, right? We use mocking extensively, right, internally in the code base. I don't know. I think internally we've done a lot of research on it. I think we can look and see what's there. It doesn't mean the community has to accept it, of course, right? I actually very much welcome, evaluation by the community. But yeah, I'm just putting that out there that just like Red Hat has its internal requirements, Google does as well, and you'll be able to see some of them in the Google seed code if you take a look at it.
Okay. You done, Tal? Can I go ahead?
Yeah, Rich, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So in general, for me, this is my personal opinion. So I usually like to write unit tests and integration tests because I usually forget what I'd done 6 months back, and usually this tests help me out. And usually I'm also wary about contributing to projects if I can't write them, because I don't know. I don't know what I would break, in the sense, because there's a certain thing, either I can go and say, oh, somebody didn't know the code, so you change out everything, or if there is a test, both unit test, integration test, and end-to-end tests infrastructure in place, it becomes very easy to contribute, because as soon as you are able to contribute, if you break things, you get the immediate feedback instead of finding it out like 3 or 4 months later. So that has been that is how I was trained on the OpenStack kind of world. So would like to continue that where possible and make it easy for everybody else to contribute, basically, to contribute.
Yeah, I don't think anybody disagrees there, Vish. I think that's absolutely.
No, I'm just saying my personal, yeah.
I mean, it's so, it feels like such an enormous risk to make a change if you don't have end-to-end tests and things. And I think that end-to-end, like in Kubernetes, Ginkgo is used for end-to-end tests. It's not used for unit tests, right? Unit tests just use basic Go testing or whatever. So like we want unit tests to be able to run quickly and small and isolated, obviously. But I'm not, I'll just.
Correct. Yeah, I think we're probably, I was only saying because sometimes when we are asked to go off and write a piece of code, we are looking for documentation. We are looking to understand the flow, right? I'm just trying to say that the benefits of some of these things are readability, which means I actually usually go off and write go read the tests to understand the code structure. So sometimes that's what I was trying to say.
Right, and so that's kind of where I come in on the framework thing. Like if you go and like Go tests, anybody who writes Go will know how Go tests work.
Yes.
But not anybody who writes Go will understand how a mocking framework works. So that means that, like, I even get annoyed when there's a bunch of like Testify that are very simple frameworks. You can usually figure it out, but like it's like then I have to go, oh, how do I write that test? And I end up copying somebody else's assertion somewhere, right? Like the more it's just, I think Victor said, like, yeah, you don't want to test the mock, you don't want to end up having to test the test.
Unit test. Yeah.
Yes. Fiacre.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just we could talk about this for a while, but I have you guys on the hook, so I tried to hijack a few threads on Slack, but nobody took the bait. But how do we how does Google test controllers? How does Kubernetes test controllers? You know, is that a silly question?
I mean, we can go dig into the tests to see the specifics. Like, I think that when I'm writing a controller, I will generally like there's a life cycle, right? There's a I have an idea, let me try it, and it ends up being this. I tend to write it in a way that's totally untestable, and then I have to go, okay, I need to refactor, and then I refactor it in a. I break it into smaller functions, and I write unit tests on those specific functions, but testing the overall reconcile method often is less easy. We do use fake clients. Like if you go look at like some of the porch controller stuff, which is not, I would say, an example of optimal testing, but there are, I think you said you copied some fake client, right? So we'll tend to do a fake client. Those tend to be fragile, right? So like the fake clients record the objects that created or removed, and then you test, and those tests can be a little fragile, where it's like you got to make sure that they don't, just add things to an array, because we can't guarantee the ordering that things happen in, even in a test. And so we might have to sort the array, like, just there's little things like that
like
end up
testing can be testing, and that's my difficulty really in that, like you described there. So and unfortunately, unless you come from a testing background, testing is a necessary evil that comes at the end. And is always quite difficult, because you have to refactor code, because it becomes hard to test, and when it's hard to test, then that's an indication that it needs to be refactored, right? You know what I mean? There's all that kind of stuff, but I'm guessing when I Google how to test a controller, all I get is env tests, and it seems to be the go-to. I don't know if anyone has used it. It seems to be in the operator SDK project. It seems to be in, the controller runtime. People are recommending to use it.
With it, but if you want, I can pull in people who will be very opinionated about it, like
but
Ben Alder, who's been doing, who's on our EngProd team, or he's not anymore, but which is our, builds a lot of automated test frameworks and things like that. I can pull in a few folks. I don't.
Yeah, it's just to get an idea. Like I'm looking at it from, so say I looked at examples, right? So from KubeBuilder and a couple of the other stuff online, and looking at that, the structure of our Nephew controllers doesn't fit, and I'm wondering, could somebody have a quick look at it and say, is this going to be, a week's work, or is this going to be a month's work? Do you know what I mean? To get M tests in and running and working, so that's, and also you have to load CRDs, and because we rely on the Porch CRDs, can we pull them from Porch and load them into the environment and stuff like that? You know what I mean? I'm not sure whether it's, I don't want to go down a dead end, if you like, you know what I mean, with it.
Yeah, I hear you.
But
I,
yeah,
think I don't have super. I don't have what I would call clear enough knowledge to give a strong opinion, but I know the people that do, so I can certainly consult with them and see where we.
every company has a test guru, right?
Yeah.
I
So
give you an action, John. Is that okay?
Yeah,
To do
yeah,
that?
of course.
But maybe not for November 8th. I don't know whether this will. Yeah, okay. But I'll just at least we captured.
Yeah, it's probably a bigger. Yeah.
Probably next week isn't good, John.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't want to waste people's time either. Like, you know what I mean, if this isn't something that we should do, I'm just wondering, is this something we should pursue? That's all. That's my
I
high
think
level
that
kind of, you know.
so
But here's-
ultimately, right? I had a sorry, Tal, one sec. So I had for like a year, maybe I've had an issue open in the docs thing of like I want to produce documentation on best practices around building controllers. And I've even talked to some of these, actually, probably 2 years ago, I talked to someone because I saw this coming down the road, right? I talked to some of these people, but I never kind of followed up. I had a few meetings and that was it. But like there's more than just testing, right? There's an enormous set of I'll put it in the chat in a second. But there's an
Absolutely.
enormous set of sort of poorly documented. Honestly, there's not that many people in the world that have written a ton of Kubernetes controllers. As big as Kubernetes is, and there are people that have written them, it's still a fairly rarefied world. So the question is, at least ones that are publicly available, the question is, what are the best practices? And I don't think anybody's done a good job of documenting that. So I will, I'll show that link, and I think there's a lot of. I don't think it's a waste of time. I think there's a lot of work to do here to make sure we do the best job we can.
That's my point. Is it a big, is it a bit of a monster, or can we break it down into?
It is a monster, but it doesn't have we don't have to do it all. It's not a waterfall,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
We're
yeah.
just going to go forward with what we know and make it better over time.
So I'll give my own opinionated version of this. So a confession: I once failed a job interview because I told them that I don't believe in unit tests.
Oops.
So I have a certain extreme position, but I'm very, very suspicious of mock, right? Because it's not real for that by definition, but also it's very, very hard to mock Kubernetes, right? There is so much. It's not just the client, because we're actually we need to deploy controllers. I'm a strong believer in end-to-end testing. And my point is that you can do end-to-end testing fairly easily with kind, right? You can set up a cluster locally and run things, and they could be very, very fast. However, one of the challenges that I had is the problem with Docker, with OCI images, is that you need to deploy them somewhere. So setting up a test environment, okay, starting up kind is pretty easy, but starting up, well, will you have to use Docker Hub to push your images when you build them? So I actually created a tool just for this. I'm sharing the link here. It's called Reposure. And what it does, it puts an image repository on your kind cluster, right? So you don't need to use Docker Hub. That is, you can set up a test environment that includes basically everything you need to do the testing, right? So you can test exactly against that and push your images there. You're not pushing images to Docker Hub. You're pushing images entirely locally, right? So it solves the problem for me. It's a very elaborate project. I have to say it wasn't easy to do, but it does work, right? And there are all these command line tools that you can like push an image directly, pull it directly, etc. It's designed exactly for these kinds of use cases, right? That you want to put everything as local as you can, right? So my point is, if we can do end-to-end testing, true end-to-end testing locally, that kind of solves the problem. You don't have to mock. You can use a real cluster, right? It's not a production level cluster, obviously. Kind is not complete. But for the purposes of seeing whether you're breaking things immediately, it's good enough. We still need true end-to-end testing, of course, right? And we're establishing that. But for the everyday development work, you need something much quicker and easier to use. For me, at least, this worked. But yeah, I mean, to John's point, we can start with what we have. Cube Builder creates a whole bunch of stuff for you, which I personally strongly dislike. But it's a very dynamic environment. As John says, you have to learn a new framework. yeah, you have to learn a new framework. It's just an unfortunate reality for using queue builders tools because they rely on them. So I do think over time we should establish this. It's not something we can decide now, but I think it's an incredibly important topic. And to addresses exactly what Vish said, it's very hard to be a newcomer when you come in and have to learn so many systems just to do a single PR. We have to make this far, far easier than it is. And it'll evolve. Right now, it's not easy. The best we can do is document what we have and point people to the right resources. But we really need to improve it. We can improve it.
Bala?
Yeah, thanks, Tal. Yeah, I don't disagree with Tal on many things. Probably this is the one thing. So I definitely think the unit tests are needed. I just put an article on the test pyramid philosophy on the chart. Probably I'll put it in the Slack too. Yeah, I mean, mocks are meant to be fake. They are fake. They are meant to be fake because the bounded context for testing is a single method, not the whole system. So everything else is bound to be fake. So, and they're also very cheap. The unit tests are supposed to be meant to be set up very cheap. They're extremely inexpensive in terms of the setup and runtime as well. So what you could test is all the boundary conditions and everything that method is supposed to implement and satisfy. And with the mocks, you can also easily simulate the conditions where the systems that it depends on behave in a bad way. For example, you could make a call to API server. What if the API server returns 404? What if API server returns 500? What if all these conditions could be mocked and could be simulated in a very inexpensive way. So in that way, you can have many unit tests for a single unit, in this particular case, method, and you can satisfy all the conditions. And if any such condition break for any reason in future due to regression, it's caught caught very early. So end to end, to do the same thing in an end-to-end scenario, it's very expensive. End to end, you can do some happy paths, some other conditions, but to simulate every conditions of every method is a very expensive proposition. So that's where you have this philosophy of testing pyramid, where at the bottom of the pyramid is very large. That's the unit test, and as you go up, you have less and less number of tests, integration tests, system tests, because there are less number of as you go up the pyramid, they are very expensive to set up, and their bounded context is very large. Yeah, thank you.
This is the document.
Yeah, that's
Okay, John.
great, Bob. Yeah, no, I think that's great. I think actually I think
I'm done, John. It's your turn. Yeah.
No, I think I'm done. I don't think I need to add anything.
Yeah, but I think what I summarized is probably we need to. It's good to follow up and organize some different viewpoints of this thing, and continue to follow up and share some ideas and thoughts right around this as an action, and then we'll see when we can organize that. Probably not next week, but the week after that, right? Or yeah, we'll see. We'll have to schedule it. Yeah.
Just
So
one final.
I do remember what I was going to say. Sorry, just to bring it up. So totally agree on everything that actually Bala just said, and I think Victor in the chat. Just as an FYI, like if you look at and kind of relating to what Tal was saying, if you look at the Porch tests, you can run end-to-end tests locally, but honestly, the end-to-end tests, like Bala was saying, that there's so much more complexity there that other things go wrong and they end up being flakes, and so which are not, we want our code to handle the instabilities and recover from them, but flaky, I don't know. I found end-to-end tests, are much flakier than unit tests because they have much more external context where things can go wrong. You can stock out on the on the cloud zone or whatever. Like there's just all kinds of things can go wrong. So I guess I'll just leave it there. I don't know.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for the contributions. It is useful, very useful, so it's good to be talking about these sorts of things.
Yeah. That's a good topic, I think, Leon, and it's something we probably have to evolve upon and share some other thoughts based on the experience we are gathering, right, with each other. Yeah. All right, should we move to the next item? We still have to go. So is Isti on the call?
Yes, I'm here. So I guess the topic here is the problem that Vish and others mentioned on Slack.
Yes.
About making it.
Yeah.
So sorry, I only had time today to look into this because I don't know, because this week I was on holiday and otherwise and my current status is that on that is that first I try to just ran make unit on the latest commit on the main branch, and it works for me. I know that it is not helpful, but
Okay.
it works for me, and I without any go work. So it's supposed to work without using go work. You actually you can use it, but it's supposed to work without it as well. And I'm also trying to find an error. So it seems like based on the error messages, it seems like an error in the Go mod files themselves. And and the replacement lines, at least in the Go mod files, seems to be right, at least on the commit that I'm testing right now. And that is, as I said, that is the last commit on main branch. It is from yesterday by Akash. So I'm trying to reproduce the error, and Fish, you can help me on that. But my guess, my current best guess, is that you are in a state when the Go mod file refers to dependent Go package by version, and it will use that the wrong version of the dependency, and it actually downloads it from GitHub, and that may cause a problem. For example, one of the error messages that was given by, I have to check who, by Victor, it seems that there is a replacement line for lib in the lib Go package, and it is not. It would be bad, but it is not there for me. So okay, so all in all, but I can see that, for example, in the error messages, I can see that it is from a specific version of the lib of the KRM lib KRM function / lib Go module from June. The 10th of June. You can see it from the tag that it is using, and I think that might be the problem. That shouldn't be. That is at least suspicious to me.
So
should I share my screen?
No, Isman,
Yeah,
I mean,
you can share
can you hear me?
Yes, go on.
Okay. No, actually, it's a good thing that it is working in your environment. Maybe my question is if you can also share, like, what is the Go version that you're using, if you have a specific
yes, of course,
definition in your, all the things that can also give us maybe a clue why it's working in your environment, like the go.work file as well. That could be very useful.
Yes, sorry about that. Yes, so that you are right. That it might be working for me because I'm using the same Go version that we used when we created release 1. So it is. I just checked. It is 1.20.2 that I'm using.
Are you using any container? Is Podman or Docker installed on your system?
Right now, I was testing without any containers because I'm in the office and I'm behind HTTP proxy. So I'm using the, that we have this environment variable called container runnable. I set it to 1.
Okay.
I can share.
Okay.
So
what would be interesting is if you can set that back to 0 and see what happens on your environment.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree. But you mean so I deliberately started with a clean slate. So
it means you use the container.
Oh yeah. So and but so the
GitHub
action uses the GitHub action uses the container, and it should run all of these unit tests after every push to the main branch. do we see any errors in the in Git? For example,
No.
after yesterday's, because if not, that would mean for me that the containers version is also working, at least in if you run it in the GitHub's own or browse environment.
I agree. So the fact that you can that we commit, it means that the system works, right? So it has to be a local environment. I believe my issue that I had, by the way, is related to the Mac. It's the script. They are not. They are not. There's a bug in the scripts when you use Mac and ARM-based Mac. I think that's my issue. But so the fact that today people are able to check in, it means that the system still works, but it has to be something local that triggers it. Whether it's Podman or whether it's Docker or something like that. That's what we have to sort out.
Yes. So. I understand that. So that was my conclusion as well. And I didn't stop there. I tried to find out what is the difference in what could be the difference in your local environment. And that's why I said that I manually checked all the Go mode files. So for example, the origin wish your problem came when you try to unit test this controller, isn't it?
Controller I just wanted to set up my local environment, my laptop. I just want to make sure that before I push in anything, I can do a make unit and make sure I don't break anything before I push my PR. That was the goal.
Okay.
And then in my case, I have Podman installed. And in other cases, I think other people have Docker. I think what we are all seeing is the same error. Seems like if you have a container runnable that is installed on a system, it seems to be giving out the same issue. And in my case for Podman, I know that there are certain things because certain permissions, Podman is a little more secure. I have to run it with another flag. But I did see Victor, I saw Vim's, and I saw Ravi's comments. They're all seeing the same issue and running Docker. So having that run with the container, which we always have running on our local box, is a good to have to figure out why it's not working. Because any development we do in a local box, we want to be able to do that. That was my.
Okay, fair, absolutely fair enough. Have you happened to try it without the container, without Podman? So have you tried it with this container runnable set to 1 or not 0?
I tried yesterday night with it set to 1 and it worked.
And it worked. Okay, so it is definitely with the Podman. Okay.
With the containers, because I'm the only one using Podman. Everybody else is using Docker.
Yes. I know when we released, so I've tried to do the make files in a way that they still both worked for Podman and Docker, and it wasn't. I cannot guarantee that it still works, but that was the goal. So it should work with Podman.
When we get it working for a container, I can actually add those bits to make it work with Podman as well.
So the reason why today I haven't tested with I have both Podman and Docker. So with containers is again these pesky HTTP proxies, because the HTTP proxy variables are not propagated into the container by default by our own current makefiles. So that's why I just skipped them. I didn't know that that was the problem. Okay, all I say, okay, I understand the problem right now. I will try to reproduce the problem and find out what is the difference between the Docker and the Dockerless.
Okay, thank you so much.
So okay, but all in all, I've started to work on it. I worked on it for just, I don't know, less than an hour, and I'm still trying to reproduce the problem. But I see that multiple people are hitting the same problem, so I don't want to say that there is no problem. I'm still trying to reproduce it.
Yeah, I think the good thing is we have a workaround at this point of time, which is if you set that to 1 container level to 1, we should be able to do that. So that's good.
Okay, that's good. Okay. And then to be honest, so it shouldn't be
longer.
No, it shouldn't be different. So what I did is I did a fresh clone of the repo, and that is what that is what you also do, and then run okay. I really don't know, but I will try to find out what is the difference.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah,
okay,
appreciate it.
But by the way, the image pool policy, so here we are only using Go tests. So these are really just Go build. It is part of the Go build process. We are not using containers here in a Kubernetes. There is no Kubernetes clusters here. That is all I want to say. The container that we are using is the development container that we are using for running the unit tests in.
Local, yeah. Correct.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that we have no image pool policy anywhere, because we don't even have a Kubernetes cluster when we are running this.
Correct. Yeah. All right. Yeah, let's follow up and let's see. Let's get this closed down. Yeah, thanks.
Yes, follow on Slack.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it. So, John, the next item is yours, I think. Should I raise open?
Yeah, so this just came up because Liam was looking at that in the repo controller, and it gets back to the same thing we were talking about with the Bootstrap controller last week. Like we have to decide with any given particular reconciler or controller, operator, whatever we want to call them, like, do we make it a multi-vendor binary, or do we structure our code such that we can build separate binaries that maybe pull in things as libraries, but if there's reusable code but shared code between them, but maintain the dependencies separately. And the idea here would be you could do it either a separate reconciler, so it's just whole separate classes, and you can still bundle it into the same binary. It's easier. The decision's easier when we're like talking about cloud provider, because there's a bunch of things that go along with a cloud provider, but like I can use any repo Git provider with any cloud provider, right? So like this is a completely separate thing. The question is, do we have a separate GitHub one, and a GitLab one, and a Git one that we run as completely separate binaries, and therefore we don't have an issue where, we have to update the reconciler the repository controller because Git had a security vulnerability, and then because GitLab had one, and then because GitHub, they could become coupled. It may be small enough, like it's a decision we have to make. It may be small enough, the scope of this, and they may be similar enough that we're happy to do it this way. But I wanted to raise it as a point of discussion.
Okay, I don't know. I cannot raise my hand for somebody, but I have my view is the following. How I was thinking about. I've been thinking about this, by the way. I'm not from last weekend, but already for a while. And my view was this so far is that, okay, if you look at this repository, so the way I try to structure the CR regarding this thing, it is fairly generic, right? So in other words, I think what you're saying, John, you have two ways to implement this. One is through what I call a provider model, right? Which means that you have a dedicated reconciler for each provider that implements the CR, right? Or you basically have a library that sits underneath, right? That you can call depending on certain environments that you get. You basically instantiate A, B, or C, right?
Right. So just to put a finer point on that, when we have things that are extremely complex and have a lot of variability between how people might use them, like clusters, right?
Yeah.
Kind cluster, EKS cluster, GKE cluster, AKS, like there's so many differences. We put it all in a package instead. Like we don't even share a common resource. So like I don't need a common. We do for CAPI, but CAPI and GKE not the same thing, right? Like so, like what I want to do is not lose this principle that we can fill a functional hole in our external automation demand with something that's like I already have for creating ones in Google Cloud, I already have a completely separate resource. So I wouldn't want to use this resource. Now, none of these discussions precludes doing that, but I just want to make sure we don't lose sight of it.
Yeah, but here is my view. I mean, it doesn't preclude the provider, because so the provider model could basically say, use this package. You see, so that's how I'm thinking. So in other words, when do I or my view was this, right? When do I go to a provider-based thing? Is that if the implementation underneath is so different,
Right.
is very different, then I was opting for a provider-based approach in the CR, so that the provider will tell you, okay, use this package or use a different reconciler or whatever, right? So you have the choice to either instantiate one or the other. But if like for me, the repository, I was of the opinion it's a bit overkill to do so, because
It might be. That's why I want to, yeah.
And that was my opinion at the time, is like, because here, okay, at the end of the day, what you have to do is basically call library A, B, or C, right? And most likely all of these things have that library already in place, and they all have a repository thing. So we just call them.
So that might be true, but where I'm wondering about where it might start to vary, and I don't know enough about GitLab and other things, is like in GitHub you have organizations, like there's a certain hierarchy of structure that you want to plug into within a pipeline and a flow, but maybe we don't worry about that for now. So I'll let other people.
Yeah.
There's comments. I think Vish was next.
Yeah. No, I just want to confirm the understanding of what you were trying to say, John. The base you're saying, do we want to keep this in the single binary, or do we want to separate the binaries? That's what I understood the essence of what you were trying to say. And I was like going to lean towards saying keep them separate binaries for the same reasons, decouple them, and not actually have one, like a security issue trying to, you just need to go test out everything. So that reducing the coupling is good in general, is what I feel personally.
I do, but I think there is a question of, is it overkill in this case, right? Like,
yeah, because it also adds complexity, right? Because you now in the CR needs to basically say what you want to instantiate or which variant you want. So
I mean, that we are only talking about from a sandbox perspective, right? I mean, this is where maybe when somebody has their own distribution and they're going off and doing this, right?
Yes, but
then there might be a default that they might have of using GitHub. If you are talking about from a sandbox perspective, I think what you're trying to see makes sense. But is that how it will be distributed is the question, right? It may not be. It might be that this is the supported package that we do, and there might be things at the, if somebody prefers to use GitLab and GitHub versus GitHub or OCI, let's say, there's probably an expectation that it is done by the user, because it might not be in the workflow there. They will all be set up already, pre-set up.
Yeah, but so if you put it in the CR with a provider model, that means that someone needs to assign that, right? So you actually expose it to the consumer of that CR. Whereas in the other mode, you have a system parameter that you set once and the system behaves. So that's, for me, the main difference, what you see. So it has an influence on the user behavior, on the consumer of your CR. It has to deal with this. Sorry, Liam.
Yeah, I think we probably have the two systems, I think, where we might need variability are in our repository configuration and then in our GitOps, if you like, so the config sync or whatever we might, replace that with Argo or whatever. How that would work, we're going to have to abstract what we need from those systems and then have implementations of that in either our system or in other binaries that we call in from our system, I guess. So I think that I can't think of any more that we might need though. So like I think they're very fundamental to now. The repository and then the distribution,
So this is a good, I think if I understand your point, that creation of the repositories and creation and deletion and lifecycle management of the repositories is one app.
But I was looking at Porch as well. Porch is, I was wondering if we can take something from Porch and that. Maybe it's, I think maybe there's a bigger discussion than what we have time for today, but I think Porch can work towards, can Porch work towards, it can work towards Git or GitLab or GitHub on many different.
That's because there's a common interface, All of these, so the APIs for lifecycle management of the repositories are unique to the vendors of the Git, to the Git providers, but the Git API itself is not.
Yes.
Torch implements at the Git API level, so it doesn't, and so does probably Argo, and so does config sync. So there's less of a concern. What there is we need to be able to get the connectivity information to those products in a uniform way.
So I mean, but do we need to go beyond that common Git interface here though in Nephew?
We do,
probably
because
not.
we need to create and provision those repositories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But that it's probably a small set that we need to do. So but it sounds like, but it's very fundamental to Nephew. And then the other thing, I mean, we should then use the same sort of approach then for our GitOps, if you like, system that we're going to use. But apart from that, I don't see that we have a huge dependency on any other. There's no other, if you like, mandatory piece of software that we actually directly interact with. I know, like, we assume that repositories are there, or the clusters are there and all that, but it's those two I think are the most fundamental to Nephew right now anyway.
But so we are trying to document the different options we have, right? We have, okay, Bala, you're first. You're still next. Sorry.
Yeah. Thank you, Wim. Yeah, I'm also kind of on the fence. So a couple of things that comes to my mind. Obviously, three options that we are obvious options are Gitea, GitHub, and GitLab. I'm also thinking somebody could be running Git on a commercial distribution. Say, for example, somebody got from, say, Atlassian, which is Bitbucket, which is based on Git. They may be running in their private stuff, and they may want to use that as well. So I don't know, so I'm asking the question. So in those situations, do we think, is there any kind of additional mechanism that is needed that should necessitate decoupling? So if we are anticipating such scenarios, then probably having an architecture which loosely coupled and letting the users of this to provide their own hooks, maybe otherwise they will have to change the controller themselves.
Yeah, so I think we're out of time, but I think that the point, I think that's a really good point, Bala. This is my option 3, right? Like, I wouldn't use this controller that we're building for the Google case, at least for CSR. But the other point is that these aren't mutually exclusive. We can provide a binary that does it for a couple common things, but you can still use the other mechanism. I'm getting kicked out. I gotta go. But I think we need to continue.
Maybe we should follow up. Yeah, we are out of time. Maybe we'll continue this. We'll continue this as the next items. But yeah, so these are not mutually exclusive, by the way, right? So so they are all options that we can consider, and I
think it's an R3 discussion anyway. I think so. Yeah.
I mean, this is not. I mean, the sooner we have clarity and information around this, the better. I think it's for all of us, right? So I think we should discuss. This is just to say what are the options that we typically have at our disposal, and then we can decide depending on the scenario which one to pick. Okay. But so let's follow up on. I'll put this as an action, right, into our meetings, because we are out of time, and then we can follow up on this. Because this is a good thing to have a good understanding upon in general, I think, right?
Yeah, cool. Thanks. So before we go, Wim, I think you talked about 2 PRs. I just want to get them going. So is there anything that you're looking for from a particular set of people, or it's a generic thing to approve those 2 PRs?
So I'm going to do a thorough review on 57 right now, right?
Okay.
And so I would suggest, because the 56 is depending on 57, because it's today 56 has also PLMN info, but 57 also defines PLMN, so they both overlap somehow. So if we approve one, then I think the next one can just take the code and remove that code from the PR and just refer to the one that we approved. So that's why the order in which we do this is important. But I would recommend everyone to do 57 ASAP so that we can get it merged, and then we can then move to 56.
Thank you so much for the guidance.
All right,
have a good
thanks.
one. Good discussions.
cheers.
Have a good one. Bye bye.
Thanks. All right.